Okay, so again, today we're doing 3-1. Tomorrow, you're going to do your pair deck. Make sure you put your class number on here. And talking about number 1, those are shaded. And so think of it as sidewalls, and that'd be parallel planes. And so you need a 1 right there if you're trying to see the spelling of it exactly. There's 3 L's in parallel. So that one's parallel planes. We'll get to parallel lines in a moment. Parallel planes is number 1. Okay, on number 2, you have lines, and these little arrows like that mean they're parallel. And what we're interested in is these little angles that are marked. So you've got 2 parallel lines cut by your transversal. And so these would be alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles. So this is number 2 right there. We're going to get into some of the words for this in a few minutes and also tomorrow. But basically, think of between the parallel lines is called interior, and the angles that are marked are exterior because one is above and one is below. So we're going to talk about interior and exterior. And then also you've got this transversal, which is basically like the cutting line. And if you've got one on the left and one on the right, that's called alternate because they're not on the same side. So we have alternate exterior angles. Number 3, this is just a parallelogram and it's shaded, so this is going to be a plane. So that's what we mean by plane. Remember, point, line, and plane are your undefined terms. Okay, number 4, here you have your parallel lines, and these angles are interior because they're between the parallel lines, and notice they're on the same side of the transversal. So this is called same side interior. Same side interior angles, and so that's number 4. Sometimes as we go through this more, I'll just abbreviate it as SS int. Same side interior. So in other words, they're both on the left and they're both between the parallel lines. So that's same side interior. Number 5, this one is showing this line and this line. So they're not on the same plane. So this definition is skew lines. This is number 5. Basically, you see that they're not on the same plane and they don't intersect. So SKEW, skew lines. Skew lines. Number 6. Now this one, they're both on the same side of the transversal, sort of like number 4, except this one it's like you got an acute angle, then you skip an obtuse angle, and then you got another acute angle. And so they're talking about these angles which are equal, and that's called corresponding. Corresponding angles. So this is number 6. Corresponding angles. So it's basically an angle, skip an angle, then you have the next one. corresponding angles. Number 7, this one, what's darkened is this line, and we've talked about it a little bit on these others, but that's called the transversal. Transversal. So that's number 7. If you need to see the spelling of it, it's right there. Transversal. Transversal. Transversal is the cutting line. Number 8 is your lines that have the little extra arrows, so that'd be parallel lines. Parallel lines. So way back in the beginning of this assignment, I put parallel lines, and I'm going to change that to number 8. Because parallel planes was number 1. Parallel lines. Okay, number 9, this one, here's your parallel lines, there's your transversal. These are alternate because they're on opposite sides of the transversal, and we have to say either interior or exterior. So again, since they're between the two parallel lines, these are called alternate interior angles. And sometimes I call that alt-int. So that's number 9. Alternate interior angles. So they're on opposite sides of the transversal and between the parallel lines. Now, all of those examples are kind of basic, and they have the horizontal lines or the parallel lines. They could be oriented different. Like what I'm going to do is just rotate my paper a little bit. And so now they look like vertical lines with that transversal, and it's still considered alternate interior because it's between the two parallel lines. So remember, that's between the parallel lines, even if the paper is rotated. You don't have to write that part, but I'm just showing what we did. Alternate interior, it's between the parallel lines, even if the paper is rotated. Just like if we looked at 6, corresponding, that's still corresponding even if you have your parallel lines as vertical. And number 2, this is alternate exterior, even though you have your vertical lines. And these are same side interior because they're both between the vertical, and then that's the transversal. So you could rotate your paper different ways. Any questions? Okay, so that's your vocab support. The next part we're going to do is the reteaching. So I am going to read through this since we haven't done our pear deck yet. So not all lines and planes intersect. Planes that do not intersect are called parallel planes. So a good example of that would be like the ceiling and the floor, or like two walls that are across from each other. Lines that are in the same plane and don't intersect are parallel. So those are the lines you're used to. And the symbol like that shows that lines or planes are parallel. Here they put a little box there, and we're supposed to put the symbol like that. AB parallel to CD means AB is parallel to CD. Sometimes we do it straight up and down. Sometimes we slant it forward a little bit. That doesn't matter. But basically it's the two lines like that. And then this bullet says lines that are not in the same plane and that do not intersect are called skew, S-K-E-W. So that would be like AC and BF. AC is skew to BF. AC and BF. Those don't intersect. Kind of like on one of the tables, your front leg of the table with the back line of the table. And I can point that out tomorrow also. So here's all your parallel planes. A, B, D, C. Okay, they're reading it clockwise in this case. So this, I'm going to say the top. So the top would be parallel to the bottom. And we did something like this before. The top to the bottom. The other one would be the right to the left. And C, D, H, G, that'd be the front to the back. So remember when we're talking about space in this context, it's like a three-dimensional figure. And so like if you think of, the front of the figure and the back of the figure, those would be parallel, kind of like on a box. So examples of parallel lines, again, we need to fill in these little boxes. CD, AB, so I'm just going to do this part. The EF is also parallel, and the GH is also parallel. All of those are like horizontal, so those are examples of parallel. We didn't do it yet, but there's also a whole bunch of vertical ones that are parallel, all of those. And then here's a couple of examples of skew. CD is skewed to BF and also to AE because CD is in the front, AE is in the back. And CD is also skewed to EG, which is this corner, and to FH, and even to BF, like we said earlier. Well, AC is skewed to that. AC is skewed to that. So that's several examples of skew lines. Any questions? Okay, so now for your exercises. In these exercises, use the figure at the right. Shade one set of parallel planes. So what I'm going to shade is the top and the bottom. If you want to use map colors, you can, or if you just want to use your pencil or pen. So that's the top and the bottom. Now it says trace one set of parallel lines with a solid line. I'm just going to do the front ones. So I'm going to make this darker and this darker. So those are the vertical ones. In my example, vertical ones in the front is what I marked. You don't have to write the description if you don't want to, but that's what I'm showing. And then it says trace one set of skew lines with a dashed line. So the other was a solid line. Skew is going to be a dashed line, and so the one I'm going to show for this would be this part with this one. In fact, I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to use red. Okay. May not completely show up as red, but like this front part with this side part. Now, it's not this vertical one because then those lines would intersect, right? So it'd be the front with the back line. Okay, number 4, use the diagram to name each of the following. A line that is parallel to RS. So if you got RS, an example would be TU. So TU. Since we're saying line, not line segment, we need this bar as well as the arrows. So remember, we're kind of going back to Chapter 1 where we put our symbols above it. So even though like in the figure it looks like it would stop, it continues because a plane would continue in every direction. Okay, number 5, a line that is skew to QU. Okay, so if QU is here, then an example would be RS. RS. So you got QU, which is that front one, and RS would not touch it. And it doesn't intersect, and it's not parallel. So the main takeaway from this is skew means not on the same plane and not intersecting. Okay, number 6, a plane that is parallel to NRTP. Okay, so a plane that is parallel to the left would be the right. And we're going to say OSUQ. OSUQ. Remember on these, you could start with any of these 4 letters. You could have said SUQO or anything like that, or gone the other direction, OQUS. So there's so many different combinations, but again, normally we talk about it clockwise, and so that was my way of saying it. And when we're talking about a plane, we don't put any extra symbols on top. Then for number 7, it says 3 lines that are parallel to OQ. Okay, so OQ is this one, and so one of them could be NP. And another could be, let's see if we got this one. RT is parallel also. And SU is also parallel. So any of these that are tilted in that direction. The one that may not seem that obvious is like if you've got this top right corner, then the bottom left corner would also be parallel to it. Because if you think about your plane, which goes this way, they would be on the same plane. So RT would be considered parallel to it, not skew. Any questions? Okay, number 8. Here they're talking about true false. If it's false, explain. And so here we have HIKJ. HIKJ. So the bottom parallel to IEGK, which is the right. So if you just identify bottom and right, it's not bottom and top, so that wouldn't be parallel. So that's going to be false. They intersect. False, they intersect. Then on this one, number 9, DH, parallel to GK, DH, and GK. So you've got this vertical one and this vertical one. That would be the plane that connects the top left to the bottom right, and that's true. So again, that's the tilted plane between and so these lines would indeed be parallel. Okay, number 10, HJ and HG are skew lines. Well, even without looking at the figure, both of them have H in it, and so it's going to be false. They intersect at H. False, they intersect at H. Now I'll look at the figure. HJ is this one, and HG is that one. So they intersect at that point H. False, they intersect at H. Then number 11, FG parallel to KI. FG is horizontal and KI. They're not parallel, they're skew. So this is going to be false, skew. So that'd be a good example of skew. Are we good? Okay. So there's that page. So far we've done the vocab and the front side of the reteaching. Okay. Now on this side of the reteaching, it shows A and B, which are not parallel, because notice this part is further away than this part. So parallel would be like the same width apart, and they're not, because you can see it's tilted and this one intersects. So they're closer together on this side. So sometimes you're going to have parallel lines, sometimes you're not. X is still called the transversal, which is the line that intersects two or more that are in the same plane. One of your main concepts, again, is interior or exterior. So any of the 3, 4, 5, or 6 would be considered interior, and the 1, 2, 7, and 8 would be considered exterior. So again, interior are between, so that's those. Exterior, outside, so that's those. Even if we have, the figure tilted like we did before, these are between, so these are interior, and the other ones are exterior. Okay, so we have a couple of different types listed here. There's alternate interior, which are like 3 and 6 and 4 and 5. Okay, that's alternate interior because they're on opposite sides. They're not a linear pair like 3 and 4. 3 and 4 would be a linear pair. So 3 and 6 or 4 and 5. Alternate exterior would be like 1 and 8 and 2 and 7. By the way, because these lines are not parallel, these angles are not equal. These are not equal since the lines are not parallel. So usually alternate interior and exterior would be equal if you have them parallel, but in this case they're not parallel, so we don't know about the numbers for them. And then for the same side interior, that'd be like 3 and 5 and 4 and 6. So again, normally these would be supplementary, but they're not, since the lines are not parallel. So I'm going to put not supplementary, since the lines aren't parallel. Not supplementary, since the lines aren't parallel. And then you have your corresponding, which matches the positions above or below, but on the same side. Like you skip an angle, 1 and 5, so you're skipping 3, 3 and 7, skipping 5, 2 and 6, skipping 4, and 4 and 8, skipping 6. So these are not equal, but usually they are. So not equal due to lines not parallel. And it's like usually obtuse, skip the acute, and obtuse. So these two would be an example of corresponding. Let's look at that with 1 and 5. 1 is an obtuse angle and 5 is an obtuse angle. So those are your corresponding. Any questions? Okay, so now number 12, name all pairs of of corresponding angles. So we've got 1 and 5 and 4 and 7, 1 comma 5 semicolon 4 comma 7 semicolon. So those are the ones that are both on the left, and then 2 and 6 and 3 and 8. 2 comma 6 semicolon 3 comma 8. So there are like lots of corresponding angles. Remember previously we talked about vertical angles like 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. But these are corresponding, so like 1 and 5. Alternate interior would be like this 4 and 6 and 3 and 5. So there's only 2 pairs of alternate interior. In the same way, there's only 2 pair of same side interior, and those would be 4 and 5 and 3 and 6. 4 and 5 and 3 and 6. Then alternate exterior would be like 1 and 8 and 2 and 7. One comma 8 semicolon 2 comma 7. Okay, now this part says use the diagram at the right to answer 16 and 17. Decide whether they're, well, what type they are. 1 and 5, they're on opposite sides, so they're going to be alternate. And we need the last name also. Since one's above and one's below, that means they're exterior. So alternate exterior. And then 4 and 6 are same side interior. I'm going to put SS int. SS int. Okay, there is no back. We did completely finish this, and so I'd like y'all to turn that in for like a note check. That's going to be all for today.